Okay, so let's move on to, well, also again, the last person, Astolfo. What, in your opinion, they need to fix before the next step?
So my discussion topic is balance. Pretty much every unit type that you guys want to talk about, you can talk about. We did go into elephants quite a bit and heavy artillery. So if you talk about that, try and keep it a little brief. And then towards the end, we'll do new factions. Which one you either think they'll do, or which one you'd like to see. Honestly, either or. You don't have to pick one or the other. But to start, I would say that the balancing of the game it's not bad. It's things can be changed here and there, and I don't know how much of it is ping. For example, pikes. When I was playing pikes or playing against pikes, you know, a ping delay is huge, right? I don't know if the guy has his unit in phalanx or not, and I could run right into it, or I could run into a guy and drop phalanx, and he doesn't even know I dropped phalanx. Does that make pikes OP? No, it doesn't. Pikes are, pikes. They should do that, right? But anyway, what are you guys thinking? I guess I'll start with Mistru.
Oh, thank you for putting me on the spot. Yeah, in terms of pikes, I think we should put the ping and connectivity issues out of the equation because that's not a balancing factor. That's just a totally separate issue. And yeah, pikes are broken because of many other things. They are just sometimes just too good at too many things. It's very difficult to flank them, especially when they can just, do some bullshit maneuvers in literally gluing themselves to the wall, dealing still shit ton of damage, being unable to flank, being unable to be routed. The control they exert over the capture points or any area they're in is also very strong. And there's very little you can do against them. And those issues were there in the wargaming version, and it still persists until this version. And now they are maybe even more amplified because of the new game mode. So I think, also to add to that, right? Pikes have underwent huge changes towards the end of the wargaming era, right? A few of the last patches were entirely or maybe mostly focused on changing and reworking the pikes. So, well, CA kind of agrees that pikes have to be reworked, and I think they largely reverted the changes they made for the Chinese release. Probably, to go back to what they know sort of worked, right? But it had a lot of issues and still has. But to go back to a more stable pike build, to allow us to focus more on testing the new game mode itself. And also in the previous podcast about the first test and our feedback about it, we talked a lot about the new game mode, right? And we didn't really touch the balance, and the consensus was like, yeah, balance, it's what we know, right? And it's not that bad. It's pretty good actually. But now kind of the honeymoon phase ended, right? And we've got to spend more time with the game. And some of the issues that keep persisting since wargaming, some even from Steam, they start getting to you again. It's like, hey, Arena is back, right? It's like, oh, Arena is back, and the issues are also back, and that's why we are here now talking about them. So yeah, Elephants of Artillery, we touched on them before. In my opinion, still broken, still need some fixing, as do need a lot of things. But I'm not going to go into too much details about it. I'll leave the functions for later.
So I was kind of hoping you would talk about cavalry a little bit since you're a resident range player here, but I guess we'll move on and see if someone else touches it. Shlomi, what are your thoughts?
Okay, let me touch on that, right? I've talked about cavalry and range mostly in the previous podcast as well, and how that relates to the new game mode, because that's what it mostly relates as well. If we're talking about just the unit balance itself, yeah, they're mostly okay. It's just how they play around the new game mode.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's part of what makes cavalry so strong right now. And infantry on a little bit of a weaker side when you compare it to something like pikes. But Shlomi, what do you think about the balance of the game currently in units?
Well, I think highly specialized units are kind of the meta right now. And You can balance this out a bit by either making more room for counterplay to those units, like make their weaknesses bigger, so to say, or by buffing out those not so specialized units, just like common infantry. But I would prefer to have more room for counterplay. That's surely a way to go. Just like with pikes, they seem super strong. Shield bash, drop the pikes, and kill anything within seconds. It's too easy to not do, and you don't always have dogs around, and even those get a shield to their face. So yeah. And when it comes to cavalry, this was just something I observed when casting the show matches. Um, very mobile units like foxes kind of seem to going more and more into the niche that cavalry should fill. So I'm not. I think cavalry is still very very strong. Maybe because of mobility reasons, the strongest right now in the meta. But I feel like units like foxes are a strong second, but are very much in the same niche.
I would agree with that. I think, Foxy's topic, unit speed, is in most games, and true to this game, unit speed dictates what fights you can and can't take and where you kind of stack up in the meta. And speed is king to a lot of people. George, what do you think about balance and unit
So
types?
if I could touch on that, right, about what Shlomi mentioned, Fox is kind of becoming more prominent. What I've noticed and what I think about it is that, those units are not necessarily unbalanced in the light of the new game mode, is that the playstyle changes so much because of the new game mode. And it's just like the meta adjustment period, where players need some time to figure out what works, what doesn't, and how to play around new objectives. And yeah, we definitely saw the rise of cavalry in the first test, but by the end of the second test, cavalry kind of fell off, right? Foxes rose a little bit to be more prominent. Archers kind of returned to the to favor. I got some parties where I had actual good protection, where I just wasn't left alone all the time and just getting charged all over the place. When I had a few reliable players around me who could actually defend me, archers can still do well in the new meta. It's not like they're completely out as well. And so units like elephants, pikes, artillery, and maybe some other unit types, they need balancing themselves, and the other will just wait how the meta shapes around them and how the players create the meta themselves.
I agree with that. I think, for example, like you said, archers are, they're not any weaker than they were. It's just people aren't playing around them like they used to because the game mode changed. But I think you summed it up great, George. What are your thoughts on balance and unit types?
Well, I think balance is obviously a difficult issue to solve because there's so many different units, the unit types even, and obviously the way that people play these units changes. The role that Falx is, like people already brought up, Falx has played a much more cavalry-like role recently, and so they need a balance in their own right compared to if they were balanced before for their sort of previous role. And I think it's obviously a difficult and important issue, which makes it very challenging, but also very key. It's difficult to point out specific units because each unit they can feel overpowered in sort of their own right, if they're in their own sort of situation. So I feel like we already mentioned about elephants, obviously pikes. I think you can make an argument for pretty much any unit being overpowered in certain scenarios, and so I believe that properly more testing is sort of required to see where people go with this new game mode, and once people have actually experimented in what becomes those sort of meta picks unit wise, commander wise. I just think there's so many little nuances that still need to be found out before we can make big claims about balancing apart from things like, oh well, heavy artillery kills fun, or elephants need a nerf because they do too much damage or something. I think getting into specifics is very difficult.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, like you said, units always shine in their own regard, right? For example, during the show matches, I know a lot of people were playing Falxes instead of infantry. I think I and one other person was the only person who played infantry, and the rest of people played pikes or Falxes out of a full lobby. Does that mean infantry is weak? No. I mean, I did a great job once I was actually able to get on a flag, because they play differently, right? They have their own strengths and weaknesses. And I think, again, like you said, we just need a lot more data before we, slap something OP or underpowered, especially when you're looking at, something, example of archers, right? I mean, archers should die to a cavalry charge. Does that mean cavalry's OP? Not necessarily. I mean, could they be protected better by their teammates? Yes. Did they used to be? Yes. Anyone else have any thoughts on George's comment before I move on to
Yeah,
False?
I'd just like to finish it off for like what I was saying, because I thought you added some good points. Like, Maestri plays a lot of range. He's probably more likely to say that the cavalry is
I'm a cavalry
overpowered.
player now. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, well, so exactly, right? So, but people that used to play ranged, or people that still do play ranged, I'm not going to throw around names in case I get it wrong, that now they might be like, they're more likely to say that, oh, cavalry's very overpowered and my archers keep on getting one shot and that. But we have to look at, again, why they're getting into that situation of being one hit. Is it that simply this cavalry is overpowered and can't be stopped by anything, and all it does is just run down one flank and nothing can stop it? It just kills everything in its path, or is this archer player or range slinger player or whatever getting one hit because they're just not being protected by their team? It's easy to throw around accusations, but to actually have something to back that up is another thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I want to add to what George said. I really like the argument about the roles they need to perform on the battlefield and how they changed because of the new game mode. And if this game mode is, the main game mode, the flag premier game mode for the game going forward, I think the balance needs to be adjusted to how the roles of the unit have been adjusted. So how now units that can control the area and stay on point, quite literally on the capture point, right, are more prominent. I think that's why we see the rises of Fox, because they combine both the staying power of an infantry unit and the speed of a cavalry unit. Obviously, they're not as fast as cavalry, but they're not as weak as cavalry in holding the points. They're kind of in the golden middle in that regard. And also because of the fall from the grace of the ranged units, which are one of their main counters, since the range presence is largely reduced, Fox is also, because of that, rise to power. And that's just shift in the meta because of that. And if that is the main game mode moving forward, maybe the balance needs to be adjusted and looked into based on the new roles. So if Foxes are really good at the key tasks that need to be performed, key roles that need to be performed in the game itself, in the battle itself, then maybe they should be nerfed according to that, right? Because since they're very good at the very important thing, well, maybe just nerf some of their aspects so that they're balanced and not one of the best unit types, right? Same with elephants, same with archers, same with any other unit type.
So, Shlomi, Falks, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's about balance in a whole. The problem is we only have a blind pick feature. You can see what your team, your group is playing, but you won't know what at least 16 other players in the game are going to play. And by that logic, you will always, or will most of the time, face the problem that you might have not the counter pick for some units. And that's something that really needs to get addressed in that sense, because if there's nothing that can touch you, you're free to do what you want, and a lot of units can really get into that positions.
I mean, the only way to fix that is just better matchmaking, and that will be able to create more balanced teams, which also maybe helped by just having a larger player base. But other than that, like if you want to go into radical solutions such as, I don't know, like selection mode,
A pre-game lobby.
once you have, yeah, I mean, private lobby is a separate thing. Yeah, but it's sort of like in League of Legends, right? When you, well, in League of Legends you have only one map, right? In the new game mode, main game mode. But yeah, you have the pick phase, right? So something like pick phase in Arena, I don't think it has a place in the game mode we have. So yeah, the only way is just better matchmaking, and that's it. We shouldn't dwell too much onto it. Although
can agree with
matchmaking can be one of those things that need to get improved before the release, right? Because you don't want to, you know, people also will feel it's like, oh, I've lost this match because matchmaking was absolute shit, right? My team was full of tier 5s and 4s, and the enemy team was full of 6 and 7s, right? And then they get salty because of that, and that makes them feel bad and possibly quit the game. And this is what we were talking about in this segment.
I can agree with that. If they do ever go down another type of game mode, for example, a ranked thing, I think a pre-game lobby might be beneficial for that. But for how it's currently set up, I agree. There's not much, to have a 2-minute pre-game lobby while everyone locks in their picks might be excessive for what Arena is. How about you, Fox? Any ideas on balance or unit types or what should be buffed, not buffed? Whatever your thoughts are on it.
Well, to be honest, I think it's in a pretty good spot. I think we are a little bit biased in terms of what units should be balanced and which shouldn't, because we kind of measure the balance by how we play the game in private lobbies and like show matches and tournaments, where it's like completely different in terms of communication, like the communication between the players on each side. You don't have that in public matches or like in public ranked matches, even if we get to that point. And I mean, some unit types like Roman infantry, for example, I think it's not really getting picked very often in matches like those that we did, because they really don't have a purpose in the game right now. Really, they just I mean, like Roman infantry is like a good buffer. They excel when you like go in, fight the match, like a skirmish for a long time. But in like our private lobbies, it's not about like a drawn-out fight. We want to encircle an enemy, flank them, break up their ranks, everything that we can to win the tournament or the show match or whatever it is. So obviously we will pick units that excel at that. And we kind of lose the focus on like what the game really is about right now, which is only quick matches, like public matches. And in those, you still see a lot of Roman infantry because they have a purpose there, I guess. So it's really hard to actually say what is unbalanced and what is not unbalanced. In my opinion, pikes are fine. In my opinion, every unit is kind of fine. Sure, there are some minor stat changes that would be appreciated, but it's not. I don't feel like it's really needed to change any unit a lot at the moment. But I think that's also because I only play Foxes and I can choose my engagements. Like if I have a free hand on the battlefield, I can do whatever I want to do. But if someone wants to pin me down, I'm fucked. So just choosing the engagements is also a big part. But I'm not sure. I don't think anything is really unbalanced at the moment. I haven't really seen a lot of Slinger players, I have to say. So I'm not sure if they are good or bad right now. I think there was one enemy player who was shooting me. I died, obviously. But it still took some time. It wasn't too bad. Archers are easily avoidable right now. If they hit you, obviously it's bad. Javelins I haven't seen at all, really. Only in the show matches that we did, or like in a pre-made squad in public matches. But I haven't seen a lot of them. So it's really hard to say. Maybe just we need more games or like more matches to play to have a more definite picture of what is going on. But right now, at least from my perspective, from a Fox player perspective, it's like everything is fine.
Okay, let me disagree here with you, Polloxy. In terms of that, units are overall fine, and no, not of the units really needs adjustment. I still think that we need some larger reworks for pikes, artillery, and possibly elephants. And other units also need slight adjustments. And in our first podcast about Arena coming back, and which was also very similar in the tone of this segment about what they need to get right this time around, Mongoose focused on the balance, and he raised a really good compelling argument that every single successful game of that type balances the game from the perspective of the highest level of play. Because if the game is balanced for the highest level of play, it will overall be well balanced. And if you balance the game for the noobs, as in you buff, for example, units that are difficult to play, right, then you completely fuck over the balance for anyone who is above average skill level. So for example, let's say cavalry is more difficult to play than infantry, right? And because of that, noobs struggle to play cavalry, so you buff cavalry so that noobs that play cavalry can be, on an okay power level. But then everyone who is good at playing cavalry will absolutely obliterate everything. And that's why you balance the game for the highest level of play, not the lowest or not the average. It's always the highest that is the way to go in this regard.
I would actually, I agree with both of you in your own regard, but looking at something, for example, like League of Legends, I know a lot of people have an issue with the fact that they do balance around the LCS because, 95% of players in League are not, diamond, master, challenger level players. And, I would say any average player with enough practice could get platinum pretty easily in League. And so I don't know if you choose to balance around what you think everyone could achieve or what you balance around the absolute highest. It's an interesting argument either way. I think for a game that has a struggling player base, unlike League of Legends, which clearly doesn't, I think you kind of do have to balance your game more towards Falks' argument of balancing towards, I would say, the peak point of an average player instead of, I would say us. We are probably the top 5% of players in the arena. So I don't know if you want to balance your game based on that or not. I will let you guys reply to this, either anyone here. But would anyone like to speak up about that point specifically?
Actually, kinda, yeah. I think the biggest problem with balancing, like what to balance towards, is usually wrong for most companies that do develop games. They always go for like the numbers and stuff like that, which makes sense for, I don't know, StarCraft, competitive, or League of Legends or stuff like that. But for a game like Arena, I think they should balance around having fun, basically. Like if it's not fun to play pikes because their phalanx movement is kind of clunky and stuff like that, they should fix that, and the unit will be better because of that, because it's more, the unit coherence is better, and also you will be less frustrated with playing that unit. So I think that should be the main focus right now, like the first points that we started on with the broadcast.
Yeah, okay, but that's kind of nothing to do with the balance, Foxy. You're kind of off in here. Anyway, let's move forward. Definitely, let's move forward. Let's talk about last point in balance after we finished the Astolfo mini show. I wanted to briefly touch on the maps. So we've noticed that we have only 5 maps in the pool right now to play. And I do hope that means that they have withdrawn the maps from the map pool in order to rework them. Some of the maps desperately needed a rework, and now even more so because of the new game mode. So yeah, I hope that they balance it and they have a better like design philosophy when it comes to the maps.